Competitive school boards is a new school choice idea. It allows 12 school boards to exist in the state with local components. So you can have a choice of one of 12. You pick one that matches your educational philosophy, your religious philosophy, your cultural philosophy, how you want education done. Now, if you say, well, I want my private school, there'll be several of these school boards that will work perfectly with private schools. Some of the private schools be 100% independent. With one exception, you have to ensure that your children are being academically educated. So there is a minimum standard, reading, writing, arithmetic, some basic history, and the like. So I'm not going to get into the quote-unquote standardized test, but as long as you are resulting in an educated child when they hit age 16, 18, and benchmarks throughout, you can have your own school board. There's a whole video, there's videos and a whole system if you are not meeting those benchmarks, or it's going to be more individualized. But that's another video. Let's just stay at the top level right now. The property tax is typically the major contributor to the funding of public schools. This is a very unpopular tax. People actively try to avoid or lower this tax. So just because it goes to education and it sounds good, people still don't want to pay that education tax, that property tax. People now freely pay for private schools. 10 to 15 to 20% of people pay for private schools, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. But it's quite high. Some people pay a little and homeschool. Some people pay a lot, go to private schools. Some people pay a medium amount, go to private schools that don't offer as many services, but they get the job done very well. So the people who freely pay for private schools, they forgo the government's offer to pay for their education. Huge disincentive to not get that benefit. They're offering $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year towards your child's education, and you're giving that up because you don't want to give up your right to direct how your child is being educated. We'll go over some of those rights. This is a significant financial burden, huge financial burden. If you have 4 or 5 kids, $20,000 each, $80,000 to $100,000 benefits, you're only making $70,000, $80,000 a year. Yeah, that's a benefit. That's a financial burden. They take on this burden because they do not want to lose all their parental rights to control their children's education. Let's go over some of that. Enrolling in the public school means the parental rights to select who your highly impressionable child will be associated with belongs to the government. If you enroll your child in the public school, the parent no longer has that right to say who that child's going to associate with. That person might have immoral views. They might have conservative views and you don't want that. They might have liberal views and you might not want that. They might have Jewish views and you want a Christian. You might have Christian views and you want a Jewish. You might want to have free enterprise views and you want socialist, or the other way around. They don't agree. They look at history weirdly, or the way you don't. They teach in a way that you don't want to be taught. They teach race the way that you don't want it to be taught, whether from a conservative perspective or free enterprise or black versus white race hatred perspective. There's a lot of ways to teach. If they're not teaching the way you want them to be taught, you don't have any say-so on how or who your child's being associated with or what they're being taught. You might be able to go to a parent-teacher meeting, you might be able to go to a school board, but that's just giving you a little bit of free speech to speak in front of a group. They don't have to listen to it. And to be honest with you, and if they did listen to it and they change it, somebody else is going to be upset. Every parent has a right to choose who their child's being associated with, and that's huge. Now, how many hours? We're talking 180 days a year, 6 hours a day, and those school hours are some of the most important, impressionable hours to teach. You don't want to have all those hours taught in a way you don't like. They spend hours per night deprogramming your child, saying, no, that's not right. No, we don't believe that. No, this is how it should be. and then their child's thinking, why am I being sent to a place where they're teaching me things, and you're just coming home and I'm coming home and being taught that that's not right. So perhaps the greatest association in a child's life is a teacher-student relationship. That's huge, and that should not be taken lightly. Enrolling in the public school means that parental rights are relinquished. Parents cannot hold these rights. They now belong to the government, the school administration, the school board, elected officials. They belong to government and government employees. So they control the religious environment, and that includes secular. You cannot teach without religion if you include secular as a religion. You don't want, first of all, you don't want it done. That's very undesirable, but you can't do it without it. So it's going to happen. Not just environment, but the worldview. Not just religious worldview, but many issues. I talked about race relations. I talked about trusting the science. I talked about sex ed. I didn't talk about it all. I've talked about it in many videos. But there's so many controversial issues. History is huge. And just a lot. The curriculum. They don't get to control the curriculum. They can have their free speech input, parent-teacher meetings, talk in front of the school board. Doesn't mean they get to what they want. They can only voice their opinion. Political thought is huge. How many teachers are political? Well, all of them, if you look at properly what political is. And if you try to stay neutral, that is a political decision. A lot of people don't want neutral. They want patriotism, or they want socialism taught. They want what they want taught. And they say that that's the norm and anything else is forbidden. Well, that doesn't happen. And for 180 days a year, that's half the year, 6 hours a day, the most important time a child learns is during school hours. That is overwhelming importance. From Supreme Court case, free to choose the academic environment in which their children will be educated. The Supreme Court has wrote in the majority. Neither can force nor influence a person to go to or remain away from church. And they said sectarian schools are church. So these are quotes directly out of Supreme Court cases. That parents are free to choose the academic environment in which their children will be educated. Well, they obviously can't in the current system. Neither can they force or influence a person to go to or remain away from church. Without that major disincentive, you cannot have that major disincentive in there. So that's force or influence, that major disincentive. We talked about the dollars to get rid of $80,000 worth of benefits is a major influence. Influencing a student's enrollment decision. Obviously, that's the Supreme Court stated that directly. The advancement of beliefs or ideas. Obviously, that's what schools are for. You cannot get away from that. It's impossible to get away from that. And it's highly undesirable if you try to stay, quote unquote, neutral. So you're going to advance a belief or idea somewhere in education. That is the purpose of education, and you cannot stop that from happening. And to the degree that you say, no, we're going to be neutral, well, that is its own belief, its own idea, and sometimes highly undesirable as well. So, the Supreme Court cases, the beliefs sought to be advanced by association pertain to political. Teachers definitely get political. Everything's political. They get economic. They talk about free enterprise or socialism, which one's better, whether you want socialized medicine, socialized housing, what to do with the poor, whatever. They do that. Religion, they obviously get into that. Secular is a religion, or being secular is a anti-religion. However you want to look at it, it addresses religion. Or cultural matters. How can you say they don't address cultural matters? They obviously do. How can you not? Children are curious about that type of stuff. It's going to come up. It always does. And parents want it to come up, but taught the way that they want it taught. a genuine independent choice of what school to attend. If you enroll in the public school system, you do not in any way, shape, or form have a genuine independent choice of what school to attend, because the government officials now hold that choice. If you want to send them to the private school, that's not a genuine independent choice, because you lose tremendous amount of dollars in benefits, and then have to pay that cost of that school. So that's not an independent choice. These are Supreme Court cases. And this is on me now. If 5% of citizens can join to create their own school board. So this is my idea now, competitive school boards. If 5% of citizens can join to create their own school boards, and a school board can just be a collection of independent schools or homeschoolers, the options would be vast. So we get rid of all those, the influence to go to a private school, independent school, public school will be gone, because you're selecting what school board you want to go under. And that school board can be just of independent schools, totally independent, no requirements other than you have to learn some academics. That's what education is there for, a minimum standard. If every school board has the option of economizing and charging less, they can do that, or offering more and paying teachers more by charging more. So you can go with very much economizing, 2 or 3 days of school, doing a lot at home, or extra hours, smaller classroom size and everything, paying teachers more. You can go for the more expensive one. You have that choice. Only one school board must stay secular. So I don't think that's necessary, because you can get with a group of 5% of your people and do it whatever way you want to. But in my system, one school board can stay secular, the other ones can introduce religion, religious atmosphere, read the Bible, learn some religious text, but they still have to do the academics. That's the primary. So only one school board must stay secular with the same restrictions as the current public school system. So just want to stay constitutional on that one. So much more at Haley2024.org. Look at the website. Look at all the bullet points. Until the next video.